What's up, everybody? My name is Clem.C, and welcome to my YouTube channel. And to start off, I've never done anything in this type of format before, never kind of spoken to the camera or anything, but I kind of want to do things a little differently today. Usually what I've done in the past is just do cover videos, which I still intend to do. I also want to start kind of talking because I feel like I've gotten to the point where I have a lot more thoughts, I have a lot to say, so I think I want to start doing things in this format a little more. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. But today I'm just going to be talking about what it is to be a musician and balance life with your career. And I'm just kind of going to tell it from my perspective, things that I've done that has worked for me, things that hasn't worked for me, and hopefully you can get some helpful insights on how to balance your life as a musician. So the first thing I want to say is it's not easy. It's certainly not easy to balance life, and everybody's life looks differently. Looks different. Sorry. In one sense, if you're young, most likely, you might be in school, you might, have a job, you might have a family, depending on your age. In my case, I have all of the above. So, but I didn't always. So I'll kind of start when I was a little younger. When I was in college, that's kind of where my music career took off because then I joined a band. I've been in bands since high school, but I actually joined a band and we, started gigging on a regular basis. So that was kind of my first instance of having to balance life and being a musician because at the time I was in college. So having to balance, having gigs on the weekends and having to get your assignments in on time. If you're in college, then Sunday at 11:59, that's crunch time because that's when most of your assignments for that week are due, or sometimes it might be a term paper or whatever. But I would say overall that part of it was relatively easy because college, and I always tell people this, everybody's experience in college is different, but for me, college was a breeze. But again, that's my experience. Your experience might differ. But I would say this is the last thing I'd say about college. It would be different if you are, depending on what your major is. If you're majoring in music, you may not have a hard time balancing being a musician because it's a part of your major. However, if you're going to be majoring in something like law or nursing, then it's going to work a lot different. I majored in business, which I feel like is a good balance of, not having a whole lot of studying to do, but it still challenges you. So that's me. That's my experience. I would say it was relatively easy to balance life and being a musician at the time. Now, when it came to me having a job, that was a totally different story. Even though I had a part-time job when I was in college, I only worked like 20 hours a week, so it wasn't that bad. Even balancing that with academics and being a musician, that wasn't bad. But having a full-time job and being a musician, that's when things start to get a little hairy. So I started to see some challenges, one of which was having to give up some opportunities. Because here's the thing, in college, you can miss classes. I mean, I'm not advocating to miss classes. Attendance is very important, especially in some classes where it's a part of your grade. But you have a lot more flexibility, even with your job. It's when you have a part-time job, they work with your schedule, so it's way easier to be flexible. You can do things. You know what I mean? You can work around it. But when you have a full-time job, that's a far bigger of a commitment than a part-time job or even college. So I have sadly had to give up on some opportunities due to having a full-time job. One of those opportunities was an opportunity to go on tour with a band. And I was able to play. I played with them for a little bit, and they offered me a full-time position with the band, and they were going to go on a countrywide tour. And I thought about it, I prayed about it, but sadly, I had to give up that opportunity because at the time, having a job, that was a very crucial time for me because I had just gotten that job. I was already a month in. So after weighing out everything, all the pros and cons of going on tour, versus having a full-time steady job, I had to go with the job. Um, because, and I don't regret it. You know, there were times I was like, man, what would it have been like if I was able to go on that tour? But I think I live with the decision I made because it was a responsible decision. Um, and that's kind of a part of it when it comes to making these tough decisions is there's no doubt that you can make it as a musician financially, even in terms of like security, being able to afford health insurance and life insurance and all those things. You can do all those things as a musician, no doubt. I'll always be an advocate for it. But again, as COVID has proven, there you can come to a point where you are not going to have any work, any performance work, I should say. So even being a musician, you're gonna have to learn how to be resourceful. But at the same time, even with COVID, there are people that had steady jobs that lost their jobs due to COVID, or weren't able to. They got temporarily laid off their jobs. So a job can kind of work the same way. So it really does take you taking a good hard look at all of your options in terms of, okay, having a steady job versus having a steady stream of music work. Which one can I do? If you can only choose one, the best thing is to be able to balance it. But you do get to a point where it's almost impossible to balance because you can only choose one or the other. And in that case, I had to choose work. And now I have a special guest with me today. So here's the thing with work, why it's much harder to balance work is because now you're at the mercy of, sick days and vacation days and things like that. So you can't just say, oh, I'm not gonna show up to work today because I have a gig here or I gotta travel for a gig. No, you can't use that no more because they will fire you the minute they find that you're taking time off to go do some other thing, unless you're sick or if it's a family emergency or something like that, or unless it's like your actual vacation days. But it's like you don't want to use your vacation days for a gig. You know what I mean? Like when you take vacation, you want to take vacation. So that's why balancing a full-time job with being a musician is super hard. But there are ways to get around it. For me, in that regard, I just kind of stick to taking gigs that are on weekends, that are in my city. So I, for a situation like having a full-time job, I just try to build a network of, other musicians, venues, and, whatever kind of work I can get within my city. So that, I think that kind of helps out a lot. But again, you will at some point you are gonna have to turn down some opportunities, or maybe in your case you may feel like that opportunity is bigger than your job, and it might be worth quitting your job for a particular opportunity. Maybe it might pay more than what your job pays you. But again, you do what works best for you. And now that brings me to my last kind of the stage of my life where I'm at now, which, as you can see, having a family and being a musician, and also having a full-time job. So that one is clearly the toughest out of the three. But again, there are ways to navigate it. There are ways to get around it. Having a family is your number one priority. And it's really tough on your family if you're going to be out every weekend, especially if you work a full-time job like I do. So I'm already 8 hours out of the day, Monday through Friday, I'm not with them. And then you add to that my work on the weekends, it becomes really tough because your family, even though you are providing for your family, it makes it especially tough because it's kind of like it's a give and take. Because you're doing all these gigs, you're providing for your family, giving them a good quality of life. But at the same time, is that as a father, they're gonna need you to be present. So it goes beyond just providing for them. Being present is also very important. So finding the harmony between providing for them and being present is what you have to do as a musician and a husband and a father and a full-time employee. So my solution to that is to be very intentional about your time. And that goes all across the board with every avenue in your life. And being intentional with yeah, I know. Being intentional with the time that you spend with your family, being intentional about the time you spend practicing, the time you spend at gigs, even the type of gigs that you take. I'm gonna be honest. As a father and a husband, I've had to kind of cut down on some of the gigs that I take. Not necessarily because they don't pay well, that is a factor, but just the quality of the gig. Your time becomes way more valuable when you become a family man. And again, your family is your top priority. So if it outweighs the time that you spend with them, then it's simply not worth it. So you have to learn how to say no to certain things. But again, also at the same time, there are certain sacrifices that you're gonna have to make. If you know it's a very important gig, then you're gonna have to make a provision for your family to make sure they still feel safe and they still feel protected. One of the things that I have done is that when I knew that I would be away for a while, I actually had my mother fly in. I had my mother fly into town to stay with my wife and kids, so that my wife has extra help and all that stuff. So you have to be creative, you have to be resourceful if you still want to be a musician and a family man. It is a sacrifice, it is a lot, you're going to be very tired, but at the end of the day, as long as your family is safe and provided for and you're still fulfilling your dream, if you can find a balance between those, then you're going to be good to go. I think it's time for some food, right? Anyway, guys, thanks for listening in. Hopefully, I gave some good advice, some good insight. If you have any stories that you want to share, be sure to leave a comment. Let me know how you balance your life with being a musician. Maybe there's things that I can do. So I'm excited to hear from you guys. Anyway, be sure to like and subscribe if you want more content like this from my channel. Until next time, see you guys later.